Recording in progress.
They have two little girls, so they
Okay.
came out.
Blue, when you're ready, we'll go. Ready to go? Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and call us to order. So we're here. This is a special meeting of Mayor Council. This is just one agenda item, and it's a broad item in the sense that we'll hear from multiple topics, but to give ourselves another opportunity to discuss the ARPA allocations. It does say discussion and possible action, but I don't think we should put ourselves under any pressure. I think we asked all the groups last time if the 9th worked for them as a deadline. I think most said yes, so we can make allocations if we want, but given that I also don't think Alex is here, so for clarity, probably not best maybe to make allocations that we're not completely sure of and such. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and start, and I know I see Preston here, and I think I've been told you have another meeting after this one, and you have an update for us on Dutchman's Harvest. So do you want to come on and go first? Just introduce yourself for the audience and then take it away.
Thanks. Preston Shell with Lewis Attainable Housing, the developer of Dutchman's Harvest. So I sent out an email to the group that had participated in a meeting we had a couple months ago. Councilman Saliba was there, about the Milford Housing Development Corporation discounted units. As you guys may recall, we committed when Dutchman's Harvest was approved to selling up to 42 units at our direct cost. At the time it was to Diamond State Community Land Trust, but then it switched to Milford Housing. Milford Housing, for various reasons, and we could spend an hour just getting into the reasons at this meeting, so I don't want to do that, but for various reasons, they're not going to be able to perform on purchasing those 42 units. It's for sale discounted housing, particularly when you don't share the equity appreciation value or you share it slowly with that home buyer, is far more difficult than for rent. You can understand it yourself. If you're looking to buy a house and you're kind of on the cusp of being able to afford it, one of the reasons you're most excited about it is, hey, I can try to find a house for $200,000 or $250,000, fix it up, and maybe it'll be worth $350,000, and that'll be the bulk of my net worth, is that $100,000 appreciation in that house. If someone said, yes, you can buy this house at a discount, but we're going to keep that $100,000, you're not going to kind of gain equity. It's a really poor selling proposition, and that's what often happens and what often scuttles for sale discounted housing, because the alternative is you let them keep the equity, and then you have a bunch of flippers that go in and buy your discounted units and then sell them the next day for $150,000 more, and you don't want that either. So long story short, that wasn't going to work. We were in touch with, for two of our other projects, Cypress Grove and Ashton Oaks, we have committed to participating in something called the Mixed Income Market Fund, which is it's a grant program disguised as a loan program that is using ARPA funding that Delaware State Housing Authority has come up with, where they kind of buy down the rental rate for a 20-year period from market rate developers. They want this as an inclusionary. The word inclusionary usually means when you have discounted units that are scattered throughout non-discounted units or market rate units. And it's a better type of affordable housing, so you don't just have, like, the low-income people live here in this community and the high-income people live here. You have everybody mixed together. So we've done that at two of our rental apartment complexes and approached Delaware State Housing Authority about 2 months ago and said, hey, would you ever consider doing that at Dutchman's Harvest if we have the ability to do that? And they said yes. And so we got preliminary approval for 24 units about 3 weeks ago. And then I talked to Delaware State Housing Authority early last week, immediately after having the discussion with David Moore of Milford Housing and him informing me definitively, we kind of knew this call was going to happen, but definitively that they were out. I called Milford Housing, Delaware State Housing Authority, and said, do you have any more money? And they said, we have a little bit more money. We can do 28 units. So 28 of those 42 units, we're going to sell them to a new entity at the same price we were going to sell them to Milford Housing for. And that new entity will then offer these discounted rentals to qualifying tenants. Remember, they still have to be members of the local workforce. A certain percentage still have to be members of the greater Lewis local workforce. So all the same stipulations regarding the type of person that can live there still apply. And Our objective is to try to get the 1.2 million. There was 200,000 tentatively committed from you guys. There was 500,000 committed from the state, not through Delaware State Housing Authority, through some other entity at the state, and the Delaware State Housing Authority is going to see if they can connect and get that to stay committed. And then there was 500,000 committed from the county. If we can keep that 1.2 million, we can get up to 35 discounted units. So, we'll still be 7 short of our targeted kind of 42 units affordable to households making below 65% of area median income. And by the way, that is the qualifying income level. These households, in order to qualify to live here, you have to make 65% of AMI or below. And the rents are set to be affordable to those households. The rents are at a discount of between 30 to 35% below market. So just for some context, if a market rate 1-bedroom in that area would go for $1,800, the rents will be like $1,150. And then 2-bedroom will be, a couple hundred more than that, and 3-bedroom more than that. So I'm asking, I know you guys have a lot of good opportunities for what to do with this ARPA money, but if you leave it in place, we will offer if you leave just your 200,000 in place and no one else participates, it'll only be 1 additional unit, and I won't be able to use it all, because it's 125,000 for a 1-bedroom, 135 for a 2-bedroom, and 150 for a 3-bedroom. So we would have to give back between 50 and 75,000 either way. If no one else participates. If the other groups participate, we take the full 1.2 million, see how many units we can get out of that, and maybe there'll still be some to give back at that point. But so that's.
You're not asking for more. You're basically just asking us to stick with the 200K that we had previously allocated.
And it would run through the Delaware State Housing Authority. So you wouldn't.
So that's who we would run our check to.
You'd essentially be giving it to them, and it's their program. And you can Google mixed income market fund. Like, you can see all the details of the program on their website.
So that's part of for clarity. So the model has changed from ownership to rental. So the Delaware Housing Authority will essentially own these units?
No, it'll be owned by an entity we control. It'll just be subject to their stipulations and restrictions on rent, and subject to their monitoring annually. We report to them.
What is it, excuse me, what was the name of the entity that would be the owner of these units?
We haven't created a name yet. We would sell them to that new entity at the same price we would have sold them to Milford Housing for, and then that new entity would be subject to the regulations associated with the mixed income market fund loan.
And they would manage who's eligible.
The reason it makes sense is because we're going to borrow resources from our other apartment projects. If we had to hire a specific leasing agent for these 28 units and a specific maintenance guy for these 28 units, the numbers wouldn't really work. So we're borrowing those assets from Beach Plum Dunes, from Sea Glass, and charging kind of like a proportionate cost. And that's what makes our operating expenses work and makes it possible.
I have a couple of questions, and I'm so glad, you're clearly trying to make this happen, and it's been challenging, I'm sure, with all the partners you've had to deal with. A couple questions. One is, what happens with the HOA fee? Because that was a big issue related to the well. And
the owner pays it.
So the owner is this entity?
Yeah, you can't legally pass along an HOA fee to a tenant.
Okay, so these will be rental units.
It's in their rent, essentially.
It's in their rent, okay.
Yeah.
My other question is, this has had a lot of twists and turns for you as well as for us, but we don't want to leave ARPA money on the table given we have lots of other options. When will you know that this is going to, this version of
We
this
know
deal?
mainly because there's no other third party between us and Delaware State Housing Authority making it happen. Like, I know I can do it. We're already doing it on 2 projects.
Okay.
I'm comfortable with the program. I know how the program works. We have the management company that can handle it. So because there's no Milford Housing or Diamond State anymore, like,
This is much cleaner.
If you guys say we're doing it, it's happening.
Okay, and so the only question will be if the other funds that you have been trying to collect for this are realized. If not, then you would be in a position where there would only be 1 unit that would qualify, and you would be returning funds.
And I'll try to let you guys have an answer on that by the end of the second week of December.
Okay.
So we'll try to get because you will need to know, do we have an extra 50 or 75 grand to give away?
Yep.
If that's okay, like December 15th, does that date work?
December 15th still gives us time
2
if we make
weeks,
like a
max.
We
two-tier
can,
list.
I assume we can make a conditional, we could also make conditional allocations, right? Which is, if we come back with this, then the
Yeah,
option.
if not sooner than December
Yeah.
15th, as the
Yeah,
as the
I'm going to
last
get up,
possible date.
we're obviously getting up with the other parties and trying to get them to answer as quickly as possible.
Right.
I'm not as confident with the county, only because I've heard third-party people claiming they're getting our money.
Oh,
Habitat thinks they're getting this 500,000, and we kind of found that out secondhand. We're like, oh, the county's already telling them that, this money might be available. So we don't know if we're going to be able to retain, I don't know that we're not, but we're not sure that we're going to be able to retain their money at this
How
point.
soon would you think you'll be able to get that answer? to
We're
the-
asking immediately.
because the 9th would be the perfect date for us, but, I mean.
All right, well, I'll target the 9th.
Okay, because that's the day we're going to make decisions and allocations.
And I would say if I don't know at that time, I think you guys should assume I'm not getting their money, and then you'll get the either, if you do a one-bedroom unit, it's 125, a two-bedroom, 135. We're already doing a ton of one-bedroom units, because, let me tell you really quickly, the three-bedrooms are selling the best. By the way, the project's selling great. There's no issues with sales. I think people, and particularly local realtors, have finally woken up and said, wait, you're selling these for what price? Well, that's $120,000 below what those are going to appraise for. And we're like, I know, we've been trying to tell people that. And so, like Leanne and stuff are finally sending a ton of buyers to us, and it's selling well. But the three bedrooms are selling the best, and we know from our experience with our apartment projects, the one bedrooms lease the best.
Yeah.
So we're trying to put more one bedrooms into the leasing program than 2 and 3 bedrooms.
Because originally, when you came before the council, before this council was configured, the idea was that you would have flexibility based upon the purchasers. It was all understood to be equity-owned at that point in time, right?
And we still have that flexibility. So we're going to overweight the number of one bedrooms in the rental program, in the MIMF program.
Right, but
and underweight the number of 3 bedrooms.
And by, you said, can you just explain what you mean by underweight?
So if 23% of the units are one bedrooms,
Yeah.
and right now I think it's like that. It's like 23% are one bedrooms, about 50 to 55% are 2 bedrooms, and the remainder are 3 bedrooms. The rental program will have about 40% of those 28 units are going to be one bedroom units, not 23%. So we're going to stick more one bedrooms into the rental program, because there's a higher demand for rentals for the smaller units, and there's a higher demand for sale for the bigger units.
I see. Okay.
So, President, essentially, is the money that we would be giving acting as rent subsidy?
Yes.
And so there's not I guess what the concern I have is the sustainability of that. How
20
what's the
years.
runway on that?
20 years.
That gives them 20 years of rent subsidy runway?
Yep.
What happens then after 20 years?
So what happens by law is they revert to market rate. What happens in reality is they almost always get acquired by another entity with another tranche of funding that keeps them affordable. But you can't bank on that.
And that would be the Delaware housing people who would, State Housing Authority would be selling at that point in time, 20
No,
years out?
it would be whatever entity that we start that is
Or that- I'm
subject to
sorry,
their
that's right.
regulations.
I-
But yeah, usually what happens is another entity like a Milford Housing,
Right.
honestly, will come in and say, we want to keep these units in the program. We have another tranche of funding from, maybe it's Delaware State Housing Authority, maybe it's somebody else. So the objective is to keep those projects in just even the what are they called? Those tax credit projects that Brett Dyer and his partner, those have a lifespan too. But they almost always stay in some kind of program, because when their lifespan runs out,
Right.
somebody else buys it with a new tranche of funding and keeps it affordable.
Is there any way to spread the wealth a little bit? I mean, here's what I'm after is, we've gone from wonderful looking, this project for affordable housing, workforce housing, maybe down to just one unit, which isn't really embracing the overall need for the community. Is there any way?
There is, but you can't use ARPA funding. I know where you're going with this.
Okay.
And that's why it's too bad.
Okay.
Like, it'd be nice if you could say, why don't we do 3 units, but
That's
we'll
right.
target 80% AMI.
Exactly.
Then your money's sourced through ARPA, and the maximum income a household in which you're using ARPA funds can make is 65%.
Okay.
So it is too bad, because initially, and I'm going way back now, when we originally pitched you with Diamond State, our objective, this was workforce, and workforce is between 60 and 120% of AMI,
Right.
and we were going to target 80% for the discounted units. But because we started raising money and all that money was ARPA initiated or ARPA sourced, it took that target down to 65%. We could do a lot more with 80%. It's just everybody's funding sources is through ARPA.
I was going to ask the same question, where you gave me 75%, but
Exactly.
it's dictated.
Yeah.
We may do something, like I don't want to tip my hand here. I'm going to try to do all 42 of these units at the end of the day. So we may take the remaining units and see if we can target like an 80% and it'll just come out of our pocket at
As
that point.
workforce housing.
Yeah,
Well, the whole
as
thing is
targeted.
workforce housing.
Yeah, the whole thing is workforce.
Well, right,
But as discounted
Discounted.
income qualifying
yeah,
workforce
that's
housing.
what I meant, sorry.
Like a lot of teachers and nurses aren't going to be able to qualify for
No,
this.
exactly.
No, but they do qualify for the other units.
Yeah.
So they can either
But
buy
not
the other units or, and remember, an employer can buy 5 units
Right.
and lease them to their employees.
And they can hold them for 10 years, right?
Well, the employer can hold them for however long they want.
You know, that's one
But
part
they
of
can't
this.
flip them.
I'm sorry.
No, they can't flip, they
They can hold them.
earn their equity for over 10 years.
Over 10 years,
So there's an equity earn-out provision even in our units, like the other 98 units, because that price started getting so much below market that we started getting interest from realtor speculators types, and they were just going to flip them.
Right.
And so we imposed, we only did this like 8 months ago, where like retroactively we imposed, before we signed any contracts, a 10-year earn-out on the equity even in the market rate units, so that wouldn't happen.
It was unfortunate. Congress, when they extended the deadline another 6 months, they were asked about the 65% and lobbied to kind of increase that, but they chose not to.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so you're hopeful to get something back to us by the 9th, and then our decision-making by the 9th works for you, I assume, then, if we're
Yes.
kind of in...
Yeah,
okay.
it works fine.
Okay.
All right.
Appreciate it. And then, everyone have, if you have follow-up questions, email,
Yeah.
everyone has his email? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And Lorraine shared that memo, yeah.
Okay. All right, thanks,
Thank
Chris.
you.
Thanks, Chris. All right, I see the BPW is here as well, so I
I
think,
noticed that too.
yeah, if you guys want to go next, I mean, yeah, I mean, it looks like,
What was that?
yeah,
Where are they?
Wake up.
yeah, whoever wants to,
I think Austin and I are going to
okay. And then just for the viewing audience, if, for first-time viewers, you might just introduce yourself.
Austin Calman, General Manager, BPW.
Tom Panetta, President of the Board of BPW. Are they the same?
Yeah,
Okay.
printed it.
All right, so I guess first I want to start out with is that, we're not here battling or trying to, if there's extra ARPA money, we can contractually obligate it to the water tower project. And we submitted a letter last week, which I think you all have in front of you, which gives the kind of a stepwise breakout of the cost of the water tower and header projects. And so just from a high level, the bids came in over for several reasons. One of the big ones was the ground out there is actually not very good. It required us to go from spread foundations to pilings. And that was a big expense. There were some other ones, it probably didn't escalate enough from the construction estimates. But we also have some check numbers, and the bid from CB&I is a very fair and equitable price right now.
That's your general contractor?
Yeah.
No,
CBA?
Chicago Bridge and Iron is the actual, yeah, they manufacture the tank and erect
Right.
it.
Yep.
Okay.
So, with that, we've done a walkthrough of the pricing. What we're short right now is about, what is the number, 600,000?
Yeah.
Yeah, $600,000. Now, we have cash reserve, we have lines of credits, but if the city had any leftover ARPA money, that would help reduce the money that we have to draw down from our either line of credit or reserves. And, this is a betterment to the entire city and service area. We are, we've been planning to put a water tower in for ages, and we're finally at that point, but we do not have enough water in the air right now to meet the growth and the potential fire loads for the system. And I think at that point, you want to add anything, or just, open up the
The one
floor?
thing I think is, I've heard some, can you just let us know, have you expunged the 900K allocation? Has that been, I know we allocated, and I think you had projects.
Yes, so-
Where are you on that?
It was written into the contract that we were going to use the 900. We're waiting on the contract documents to officially contractually obligate
Okay.
it.
And that's part of this, like the head?
Yeah,
So
no,
it's all-
so the way this worked, and it's kind of, we tried to make it as clean as possible, but it was funded at $5.25 million. There was 2 projects associated with that,
yeah.
which was the common header and the water tower.
Right.
Right.
The common header has already started. It's in progress now. The water tower was a little bit lagged just from a timing and engineering perspective. And so the water tower project is the one that went out to bid and was
you'll
just
use
awarded.
ARPA, okay.
Yes, yeah. And our goal is to have that contractually obligated in December.
So a way for us to think about is, all of the ARPA funds, if we give you more, will go
Yes.
towards the water tower
Yes.
portion of it. Okay.
And-
But there's
and-
no doubt that the full 900,000 will be obligated by the end of this month, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our goal is we're running hot and heavy by the end of the month.
Right.
And
And is
we-
that actually achievable?
Yeah.
With the contracting piece?
Yep.
It is,
Yeah.
okay.
And we would intend to do the same thing with any additional funds, is contractually obligated. So it's not conditional or anything else.
Right.
We're just going to write it into the contract with an amendment or,
Yeah, what we did last time is we included a letter and some documentation within the bid package to show that we were allocating $900,000 to show that.
Right.
And then when we do all of our submits for reimbursement through the state,
Yep.
you can show other funding, and that can be BPW, ARPA funds, whatever you want to allocate it as.
And you'll be able to complete the water tower project and the header project? Would you
Yeah.
have,
by 2026?
Yeah, by
Yeah.
the December of 2026.
no problem at all there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, as soon as I say that, I think I just jinxed the project.
Yeah, of course.
But no, I mean,
Yeah.
under any normal project schedule, it will be done well before that.
I see.
So if there were potentially a problem unforeseen, can you, in the billing process, make sure that the ARPA funds, that you tag them so that when you go for reimbursement, when the contractor bills, that gets in the first tranche?
yeah,
Okay.
that's-
That's what we need to
Yeah,
protect.
timing-wise,
Timing is
we
critical.
thought through that.
Okay,
absolutely.
okay.
Yeah.
We even said to use that first.
Yeah, okay.
We would use the 900 first, and then when we start to go through the reimbursement process, we would go after 900 first, and then go after what's left in the loan.
Whatever's less, okay.
The other piece, just so everybody knows, because from a process standpoint, it ended up back on your chair, is that the board also decided to go after $1 million in supplemental. So the $1 million in supplemental is an administrative item through the drinking water SRF program.
Right.
That was done administratively from the standpoint of you don't have to go before WEAC again. You can get 20% or $1 million via administrative, but you still go through a closing process, which includes bond counsel and resolutions that go before the council and before the board, like any other process.
Right.
So that will come back before you. I'm going to assume probably in January or
And
February.
by coming back to us, you mean that
Resolution.
the
Yeah,
resolution?
actually, it's not coming
correct?
back to you.
Yeah.
Right.
It will be the resolution will be in front of
Right.
you.
Same borrowing terms, everything.
Right, and so for my clarity, do I understand, I'm looking at your
Yeah.
letter that was submitted by, Tom signed, that what you're looking for is if we would make a contribution towards the line of credit estimate here that's shown as 600,000? Is that correct?
It's anything above 5.4 million. We essentially have figured out a way to have ARPA funds supplemental and the rest of the money left in the common header initial funding, common header and water tower funding, to get us to 5.4 million. The estimate for the 1 million, which is what was awarded, with
Right.
value engineering landed us at like $6 million. So your net is 600,000 roughly, that would have to be made up via BPW funds or line of credit.
Right.
So just to be completely clear here, it's a $3 million line of credit, correct?
Yeah, if you were to
And-
use it.
But we have never drawn down on it. That's our emergency fund.
Right.
And the line says from BPW reserves or line of credit.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
So-
right.
They would
So-
have to make that determination when that time comes.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
board would make that determination, right? Right.
I had a question about, Tom, what you said, that part of it's also for fire, public safety. Now, that's also outside of Lewis, meaning our fire department, or is it, my question
No, it's
is,
not fire department.
Oh,
It's
is
about
all-
having enough water in the
Available.
tanks.
for the city of Lewis? The reason I was asking is whether, I mean, every entity is going to be doing just what we're doing. Everybody's looking to make sure they've got all their ARPA money tied up.
Yep.
So whether anything related to the water tower is something Sussex should also look at, the county should look at.
With the main concern, actually, and not getting too far out, because GME's not here, in front of my skis, is if a fire should break out on Main Street, in a densely populated area, and you started to open up all the hydrants, it's not the one-off hydrant opening,
It's a catastrophic event.
Yeah, all your demand goes to that
All
part.
your demand goes to that,
So
okay.
it's, a fire at, well, not BB, but at healthcare centers, at, the downtown. It's that portion of it that we don't have enough water in, or we're going to be approaching not having enough water in the air
Okay.
to put out a major fire.
Okay, and what's the gallon, what's the water tower hold at this point?
A million, this one is 300,000, and then
Wow.
we're putting in a
Wow.
$1 million
That's
gallon
not
tank.
enough. The reason I'm also thinking about it is so you don't have to dip in your reserves, maybe we should add it to our list of grants to FEMA, because it is for the catastrophic experience.
There's a couple things, but you also have, like, your development that's coming online,
Yeah.
all pay impact fees, and
Right.
so you can allocate, you're talking about a project dealing with capacity that
Right.
benefits all. So
Correct.
it's, could be an allocation of how and when those impact fees come in. I mean, you got Mitchell's Corner, which is 294 homes at $4,600 a piece
Right.
on the water side. So there's means and methods to fund
Okay.
it.
So what would be helpful for us, as I understand it, and correct me anywhere, there's $700,000 that the city still is sitting on?
Around 500, isn't it?
350,
350.
if you include the 200,000.
No, and I was going to say the 700, and you take the 200,000 for the housing.
No.
No.
No?
No.
Okay, so
No, we're at
walk me through the
350.
numbers.
Yeah, we're at
That's what we have on
350,000.
hand. And if we pull back that 200, then it would be at 500.
No,
No. It would be
350 is the total.
350
That's
total
what we were
include.
told last week or so?
Yes,
Yes, it was, yeah.
Yes.
It's,
No. Oh, anyway, go ahead.
Okay, that's the discussion. So what you're saying is that
If they go
Milford,
ahead,
I'm
we only
sorry,
have
I keep you-
150,000.
Yeah, that's true. And that's what I was going to ask you, is does any piece help you? Like, I mean,
Oh,
obviously, I
absolutely,
mean, okay.
because cash is cash.
Sure.
I mean, we're going to have to use impact fees, cash reserve, line of credit.
And to that point, like, so let's assume you take the line of credit, have you gamed out like what 12 months of the line of credit payments would be, for example?
We wouldn't pay that back in 12 months.
No, I mean, like, for
Yeah.
example, if we gave you 50,000, would that be 1 year's payment on the?
On the debt?
What I will tell you is, again, I will not be here when that takes place, but I will urge them to
All
not
right.
use the line of
Get
credit.
out of the way.
Yeah, that would be the
Okay.
Too
the line.
expensive.
Yeah.
Well, the line of, I mean, the idea behind the line of credit was I don't want to call it the rainy day fund, but kind of like, pardon my French, it's like a shit fund.
Yeah.
Something happens, you have cash available. You don't necessarily have to go through and say, I need $1 million moved from the reserve account or from investments. You could say that, you have a line of credit and they can use it.
I would also assume, Tom, that the 9th works as an organization. If we give the decision by the 9th, that's not putting you in it.
What we'll do is we can put a placeholder on our agenda, so that any additional funds that are allocated, we would then put on our 12th meeting, that we would allocate them to the water tower,
Okay.
if that's the case.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you have actually funds set aside in savings. Is there a reason you're not using some of those funds instead of borrowing?
No, we just said cash reserve or line of credit. We've got to work through those numbers.
But we have a cash reserve policy
They have
that we have to
policy.
meet.
I see.
So like,
Certain
we have to
thresholds they
hold,
have.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, in theory, if you have a cash reserve policy and it tells you need to have 10 million, in this project came in at, 5.6 million and 6.2. If we were to say we're gonna pay that in cash, now we're 5 million under our cash reserve policy.
Okay.
Then you would have to build that back up, which is what we've been doing.
Which is why I was asking the question about what the potential sum was, because once we can start to narrow it down, we can figure out the best way of funding that.
Yeah, so I think it's about, assuming we leave the housing project in, it's about 150K.
Okay. Every dime
Different than my
helps.
understanding.
Okay. Is that it?
Yeah.
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
we do have a
Thank
couple of
you,
other
Tom.
projects that had come forward that, Eleanor, do you want to start us off maybe with the next one, and we'll go ahead and take your prompt and then go?
So we've talked about Milford Housing. Last time we met, we talked about reimbursing the city for the patchwork done on West 3rd and 2nd Streets, which is about $20,000.
I'm sorry, so that has been done?
It's been done.
Oh, okay,
Looks great.
okay.
We also talked about water bottle filling stations at 6 locations. That's coming in around $40,000. We talked about an ATV for the beach patrol. It's tentative budgeting for FY '26. That's around 20. Acquisition of real estate for preservation. This is where the 4th Street Preserve pledge of currently the city's pledged $750,000 for that. Engineering consultant for environmental remediation. Again, this would be for the 4th Street Preserve as well as the Army Reserve Center. A dollar amount hasn't been allocated for this item yet. The discussion about the fire department and giving the funding of $75,000 out of this, not out of the city money. The BPW, which we just learned about. Camp Theros, which is the former Troop 7. They were requesting $24,000 for fencing and paving at $34,000. And then the Community Resource Center requesting $10,000 for their winter program and $5,000 for their summer program.
May I ask a question about the water fountain proposal?
Yes.
Ask, what much was that? Was that 40? you
40,000
said?
for 6
Four-
locations.
And that's $40,000. And does that include material, labor, and does it include the costs associated with tapping into the water service that is in the area?
We haven't gotten a formal quote on an installation. This is taking some research of what the unit cost and then estimating what the plumbing and electrical work and potentially concrete work would need to be done.
Okay, thank you.
And you have spotted the 6 locations, I assume?
Yes, so we're looking at the Trailhead, and these are in order. Trailhead, Savannah Beach, Johnny Walker Beach, Canal Front Park, 1812, and George H. P. Smith Park. So an option would be to do as many as we
Yeah,
can.
not do 'em all,
Up to
right.
40,000.
Right.
And these are filling,
Water bottle filling
filling
stations.
stations.
I mean, I think one of the ways we should look at this, we don't have enough money, okay, to meet very legitimate needs. So let's put the housing, let's put the 200,000 in its own safe spot, because there's been so much commitment, just temporarily. Then I would look at, everybody who's come to us has said, even if you can't fund the whole, everything can be used. So if we had a kind of a percentage by public health, workforce housing, infrastructure, and public safety. In other words, those are the 4 things we're going to fund. Those are the categories that people have come to us, and we agree to the balance of those. Then we can help everybody a little bit. Or you can take the approach of, we're just all going to put it in, 2 or 3. I just feel like we're at the end now, and we could help people get over to the goal line, or at least move them in that direction, and it would be impactful. Now, if we have unfortunately, if we have the housing back in, I would still use that same formula. In other words, I'd take our full 350,000, and I would allocate it by those major blocks, so everybody gets something at this point. Because everybody's doing the same thing we're doing, and they're all looking for funds everywhere, right?
I like that idea in the sense that it would spread good across
Correct.
a whole lot of the community.
Yeah.
My view on ARPA money has been from the beginning, and I think what it was intended for is to kind of help communities get through COVID. And there were a lot of challenges we all had, and money was, we can all debate how much money was sent and what it was for. I am skeptical, personally, of using ARPA money for what has been pretty much line item issues in past budgets. The Lewis Fire Department, for example, we've always done that. I mean, I don't know why we would use ARPA money for that. Same with reimbursing for the roadway patchwork. I mean, that's part of what our maintenance office department does, is do that. I would prefer to kind of use it for one-off projects that otherwise would not be part of our annual budget process. And that's kind of how I'm looking at it. Doesn't mean I won't do that, won't agree, but that's how I'm looking at, what are some things here that we can really do that otherwise would never be done in our normal budget process?
Yeah, there's a lot of logic to that, particularly, I think, road and, even the water stations, we could say, okay, our goal is 6 of them, 8 of them, we'll fund one of those because that is a new item. The only reason I put the fire department on, because I do appreciate, Khalil, what you're saying, is we're not going to know the state study results, and so the fire department is going to be significantly delayed. So I was looking at it a way to give them a little bit, because I think the Finance Committee, I know the Finance Committee is going to recommend hold council until the state study comes in, because we don't know what their allocation is going to be.
Right.
So it was something, again, in public safety to say, we're committed to you, we can't commit fully the 75, but we're going to give you something because we'll be back to the table with you when the state results come in.
My thinking about that is, and I agree, is I'm hopeful that we will have something from the state. We're supposed to be getting something actually this month.
We are supposed to get it this month.
And then I think Newcastle County will be first to be released, and then Kent and Sussex would be next, so presumably in the first quarter of next year. I was just thinking that before we commit this before January 1st, the 75,000, I'm willing to gamble a little bit and see what they come up with, if we're going to get that, because we have until the end of March to eventually do the 75,000 in the budget process.
So
So-
may I ask a question for clarity? So are you suggesting that we recognize that in the past we've contributed 75 for the last, I think it's just the last 2 years we've been at 75.
Yes.
And prior to that it was something less. So we have a general understanding that we're committed at 75.
Right.
But a portion of that 75 could be funded by ARPA dollars.
I think he's saying
Is
the
that-
opposite. I think he's saying since we normally budget for that, his view is ARPA should be used for kind of one-off projects
But
rather.
do
But I
remember,
thought-
but do remember that their request is
like
much,
six, yeah,
is much more
much
than
bigger.
75,000.
Right, well,
I mean,
but their request was
Yeah.
600,000.
Yes.
Right.
But I don't think I think we've all agreed that we're going to wait until, everyone's waiting for this study to come.
Right.
To see
Right.
what they recommend. But, I mean, certainly at the minimum, as we've done, it would be 75,000.
Well-
I'm just suggesting that I'd rather wait to see what that study says before we start committing ARPA money before the end of this month. Because we're going to do 75 most likely anyway through our normal budgeting process, which we've done in the previous year.
And that's where I was going with my question. If we have a general understanding that we're committed at 75, I thought you were suggesting that a portion of that 75 could be ARPA dollars, and the difference, the balance would be made up by
That's what I'm,
ARPA.
That's what Amy was saying.
that's what I'm
right.
saying.
I
What I'm
thought that's
saying
what-
And I'm not,
is a prepayment, is basically.
it's a down payment of 20,
down
like you
payment,
said,
right.
20, we'll do 25,000.
Amy and I feel that way. Khalil's stating his position is really the opposite, which is it's a budgeted item, so.
Yeah, I'd rather use our money for non-budget.
Okay, thank you. And may I ask one clarifying question also about your statement about the state study that they're doing? And you said they're going to roll to Newcastle first before?
So-
Is that,
Yeah.
can you explain?
Yeah,
that?
so
I didn't know
Newcastle
this.
County started on this study themselves.
I see.
Over a year ago, I don't know the exact date. And then they wanted to understand because what are going to be their obligations for future assistance to volunteer fire departments? What then happened was Kent and Sussex, have the same issue with
Right.
volunteer fire. So they kind of reached out to Matt Meyer, who was the county exec at the time, still is, I guess, and said, look, we have the same issue. We're willing to contribute funding so that this consulting firm can extend it to
I see.
the two counties. I think the only thing that was understood, wasn't put in writing, was like, hey, we're getting our numbers first, since
I
we
see.
started this.
Okay.
And then you guys will get the results of the study after us. So,
Okay.
nobody had any problem, but that's kind of where it came
Okay,
from.
I did not
And
know
we
that
were
part of the
told
story.
that Newcastle most likely would be hearing at the end of this year,
I
which
see.
is right around now, and then we would be getting the results in the first quarter of next year.
Okay.
That was the plan.
Thank
We
you
all-
for that.
Yeah.
Right.
I
Amy,
did
can I
not
go
know
back to your suggestion about I think you said 4 buckets?
Right.
Are you suggesting that we treat them equally and say, like, each bucket gets 40K?
Yes.
And then if we go back and with the 200, then we're up to 90K per bucket?
Right.
And then think about what allocations you make within each of those qualifying buckets?
Exactly.
Okay, but equal?
But equal, because I don't know how you choose one over the other, quite frankly. Those are 4 primary missions of a city council.
So in your mind, you'd allocate 40K essentially to each bucket, or 37.5K?
Correct.
And then
Right.
from there,
Yes.
make your allocations?
Yeah. I'm not wedded that it has to be precise, but that
yeah.
is what
No,
I'm
that's-
proposing
yeah.
is.
I didn't know if
okay,
you were weighting security more than, you
No,
know what I mean?
I'm not, because
Yeah,
what I'm
okay.
waiting is that, what's the government responsible for? Public
Yeah, all
health,
of it.
housing,
Yeah.
infrastructure, and public safety. So how can you say one's more important than the other?
Well, another point of view on that would be that one may not be more important than the other. However, there are at least 2 organizations that have already received the lion's share of our ARPA funds. So if you take them out of the mix and look at the others.
You could do it that way.
Because we did give a significant amount to the fire company.
Yep.
And
Yep.
to
And BPW.
And not to short them, but these are all things that we may never get to do within our regular budget. And we have this kind of money there that we could do something.
That's a fair lens to look at it.
Yeah, just
Sure.
another way
So it
of.
sounds like you and
No.
Khalil are in a similar boat, which is this
Yeah.
should be used for projects that you might not normally take on.
Yeah, because, well, we have donated to the fire company pretty significantly with that first tranche to build.
They got
the-
ARPA money in the.
Yeah, the addition.
I think, yes, so I think it's a
Yeah.
good proposal, which is, let's look at the math of how we've donated our money across those 4. It's kind of a rubric that we could use should there ever be another tranche of surprise money. And so you should look at the whole, and then you put some judgment on it, because, you're not, so for example, the group that came with the fence and the road, I could see at least, my view is, the fence is something very defined. They probably have a couple other places to go for that road. So we could add some discussion there. But I think, yeah, Joe, I think it's a good idea. Let's look at how we as a governing body have allocated our funds across 4 primary missions of a municipal.
Yeah,
And I agree with Khalil. It is our responsibility, even in our charter, to take care of the fire company.
Right.
So we need to honor that.
I'll just add one thing you said, because it came up recently. Regarding, like, for example, Camp Darrows and the fence and paving. I certainly would be supportive of the fence, primarily over the paving, because primarily the fence is something that's portable.
Yeah.
You could take it and move it somewhere else.
Yep.
Because, we don't have any guarantee that they're going to remain there for the next 5,
Correct.
10 years.
Right.
Whereas paving is,
It's much more of a commitment.
yeah,
Yeah.
that could
Yeah.
work for a year, and then next thing you know, they're moved somewhere else, and
Yeah.
Eleanor, can I ask you a question about there were two, one, the use on the 4th Street, that's under, what's the allowance there, I guess, to acquire open space? Is that
So it's acquisition of real estate for
for
preservation.
preservation specifically? Okay.
Yes.
And then with respect to the studies, the environmental, do we have any idea of the cost on one, what the 4th Street might need, or we have no idea on the
We have
environmental
no idea on
activity?
either. It would just be an allocation of funding
Okay.
to go towards those costs.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know it for the Army Reserve, but what's the environmental, is an environmental attorney for 4th Street?
It's for the remediation. I think it's low ground and what would need to be remediated to make sure it can sustain. It
Okay.
can hold the water.
But it's not in a floodplain?
No,
It's not in the 100 or the 500
don't
floodplain?
believe so.
We do know it's in the Highland Acre,
In
Tax
the
ditch.
Tax
ditch,
ditch.
the tax
Yes.
ditch.
Right.
Right.
It is in that.
Yeah. The reason I
And
was
there's-
asking that is because there's FEMA money, but I don't know if they would give it to us if it's not in a floodplain.
Right.
It would be, I
yeah.
don't know. We'd have to run that by Philip.
The other thing-
Because he was supportive of that. We did look at a grant, and DEMA was supportive, but we didn't say it wasn't in the floodplain. He knows that it has wetlands. So we probably should follow up with that one. We could probably get an answer rather quickly whether that would be disqualified, because if not, there's a grant that could help us with our commitment to purchase land,
So-
to add into that pot.
let me add something. The mayor and I have spoken about the Army Reserve Center, and particularly the environmental remediation. So the current state of play is that the Army is waiting for us to answer whether we want to keep the building or demolish it. If we're going to keep at least part of the building, they need to allocate money to remediate the lead and asbestos and all that stuff. One thing we've discussed is potentially, because everyone I've talked to, and I understand almost everyone says, well, you're most likely going to demolish the building. There really is little value in it. There's certainly no historical value and others. So let's just say operate on the assumption we're going to do that. That means the Army doesn't have to expend that money to remediate. But perhaps we can go to them and say, but we need to do a ground contamination study. Can you allocate at least part of that money for this before we take possession of it? They clearly want to get this off their books.
Yeah, they do.
So, but if we can say, the money you have for remediation, it's going to cost us,
This has been-
$40,000.
This has been advised to us because that, similar to what we had with the Fisher Martin House, you remember where the state said, what can you put in? And then all of a sudden there was money for the Fisher Martin House. Our thought is the same thing. We go to the Army and we say, we have some ARPA funds that we could allocate towards an environmental study. Let's join forces and, use it in that way. That's a thought that we had was, going to the Army with that, which is we know that you want to get off the dime, so do we.
Right.
That kind of using it that way. And
Would that be a timing problem, though?
I don't know.
do you
I
think?
mean,
That's why we need to reach
Because
them.
in my mind, if you're doing the environmental study and it says, yeah, you should tear the thing down, then we've spent that money on environmental study, and you're like, well, you should just tear the thing down. And it's like,
Yeah.
But we're also at the point where the Army is responsible for doing the study. If we do not accelerate or, the need for the handoff.
sure.
And so they're obligated to do that. And it's probably very similar to the obligation of the sellers of the
But
Fourth
I
Street.
guess that's we're getting the same point, which is are we being good stewards of the money if we say, yeah, go and do the remediation study, or do it?
Well, they're not doing a study. I think they're doing remediation.
Exactly. Do the remediation,
Yeah.
and then we come back and say, well, we're going to tear it down anyway.
Well-
Yeah.
Then you've wasted the
Well,
money
tax-
for the remediation.
I kind of like the idea of going for letting the Army do the project, and here's why.
Yeah.
One, we're working through with the Financial Stewardship Committee and Finance Committee how we're going to do all the things we're going to do over the next 5 years. We don't have a firm plan in place yet.
Right.
That's going to become part of it. So rather than rush, why don't we let the Army do this? We can always tear the building down later. When they do tear down a building, it still needs to be remediated before it's torn down.
Yeah.
So either way, it's got to be remediated.
Correct.
Use their funds,
Right.
and then give us time to work through with all the people involved in whether we're going to go ahead with a project over there, or how we're going to do it. Are we going to keep the building? Some felt maybe it should be kept. Some felt, no, take it down. I mean, there's a lot of decision-making to be made there.
No, understood. And that's the thing that concerns me with both of those items, though, is that there's an unknown amount that we would need. Even with the forestry, we could ask Jim, like, well, what are your estimation? But with these other asks, we know
Exactly.
the amount.
And
So
our
I think,
right.
it's easier for us to make those allocations, I
Yeah.
think, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think so too. I think we should pull off the environmental for
Yeah.
both because it is unknown and we've got a clock ticking. And we don't even know what we want them to look at for Army Reserve. So, if they keep the building, that's different. If it's torn down, then I'm much more worried about airborne contaminants than I am really about groundwater because they didn't supposedly, once we get all of those results, they didn't store underneath, so they were surface only. So I'm sure there's some contamination, but the airborne contamination from demolishing it is real. I mean,
So if we think, can we all agree to think of it in Amy's terms? And I think when we get to a decision on Monday, we don't necessarily need to think of the 25, 25, 25, 25. We could, there's some flexibility there and
Sure.
still think of those 4 buckets. But I think that is an organized way of thinking about it when we each come, when we're having discussions with each other and when we come to decisions on Monday of thinking like, here's how I think we should allocate, and then
Right.
that'll make it more organized way of thinking about it.
Could we have, by those 4 categories, previous ARPA allocation, okay? Not line item budget, so.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm not talking about the fire department 75.
what did they spend on?
Just the ARPA allocation, and then scenario 1 is if we have the commitment to continue with the Delaware Housing Authority, because that commitment is still on the table. And then scenario 2 is that didn't work, and so then we would all have the same numbers
Right.
to
I think we can make,
analyze.
like we said, conditional allocations based on that, which is if they can't perform, then we'll use the 75K or whatever.
Well, the other,
I'd like to, go ahead.
the other thing that I'd like us to maybe consider is with the 4th Street project. Again, it's kind of similar in a sense to the monies we've already given to some of the other organizations, the ARPA funds, because we did commit to $750,000 for the 4th Street project, which is a big chunk of change. And I was kind of under the impression that that would be given to us with any environmental issues, any water issues handled before we took
Right.
took over the deed on that. And so, again, we're putting that money in there that maybe we shouldn't even be thinking about because they are supposed to resolve those issues before they turn it over to us. is
I guess
my
another
understanding.
question to ask, though, since it can be used for preservation and we're committed, can 50,000 or whatever be used simply as a down payment towards the 750 that we're owed, rather than?
Yeah, it could be.
Yes, it can, because
Sure,
acquisition.
I mean, in that case,
Yes, because
then
acquisition.
they can use it for what they want because it's all part of the big fundraise. I mean,
It is, yeah. Just another way of kind of thinking about, because we've been very charitable, I
well,
think.
that's what I mean, it's not essentially giving them more, but essentially saying,
Yeah.
one of the ways that we're gonna ameliorate our costs is we're gonna pay out of ARPA funds. Here you go, here's a check for
Can I
100K.
just ask for clarification on that? So, what I don't understand related to the water issue is, it's not a park, okay? It's a forest. So if it floods, it floods. I mean, it's a natural habitat. Let it stay in its natural habitat. Nature will manage it. I don't want us to put in, well, you might have some different.
Also might be able to speak to that. I think there also are maybe potential issues with what goes underneath of there. That might be what
But-
they're looking to,
but-
I mean, feel free to keep if you want, but,
And
you know.
and the taxage is certainly something
Yeah.
that is not.
Our understanding is that that property used to be an old brick site, like a sand, I'm trying to think, it was like the Lewis
made
Sand
bricks there.
Company. And where there's a pipe that exits that property, but I don't know if there's anything that drains to it other than the Rollins property itself. Meaning, I think that pipe only supports drainage for the Rollins property. There's a single pipe that comes out to Politown Road. And then obviously a portion of it drains to the tax ditch side.
So why, I'm sorry, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, please, go
Well,
ahead.
So environmentally, so be it. In other words, if it's self-contained with a pipe that manages it, and it's not something that is going to have active recreation, because that's not its intent, it's kind of like when a tree falls there, let it fall. I mean, it's a preserve. So why would we spend money
I
to
think it-
keep it drier than its natural habitat is?
Amy, I think it's causing environmental problems for the homes along there. It's the water's running through their yards and across their properties, and it's undermining the road because it comes underneath the road surface.
But it well, I don't know engineering.
Well,
honestly.
I was going to say that line's been borescoped. I mean, we gave the, I guess, the entity that's purchasing or going through that process, we scoped the entire thing, we cameraed it, we gave it to, at the time it was Mayor Becker who was leading that, and so he had, all that information. The other thing, just side note, when you're talking about the fill stations, the water bottle fill stations, only throwing it out there from experience dealing with the electric vehicle charging stations, you may want to run a pilot before you jump into that. And what my suggestion would be is if we're putting in the pipe for the canal crossing and we put a curb stop in there, you could put one water bottle fill station in and use as a pilot project to see how, from a yearly basis, how that maintenance would be. And it doesn't necessarily save you $40,000, but it allows you to understand what that may be.
Right.
Because
Great
you're going to have it open. So
And it's where you're also going to put the hydrants so we can water the trees,
yeah,
right?
and
So
it's
you
going to be
already-
right where that little
Exactly. Okay.
concrete
That's a good
turnoff is.
Yep.
Just as a thought.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, the other one I was gonna ask about, Eleanor, is, for the 20K for the patching, I know Jay and I are gonna be looking at the pavers on Second Street. Would improvements on sidewalks be ARPA eligible?
I believe it would be, yes.
Because it's
Yes.
public safety.
So
And we did
that-
budget paving costs in our 25 budget.
Okay, okay.
I'd be much more inclined to support something like that than something that, again, is just part of our routine maintenance.
Okay.
The
That's a good point,
One-
because really the sidewalks, we've put stuff in that is buckling, okay?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
but the roads need repaving, mill and
Every-
overlay on a
whenever
regular.
there's
on
a pothole,
Right,
yeah.
and we actually have now, which we'll be presenting to you from the Finance Committee, a 10-year CIP for road maintenance and.
We can still think on the same bucket, patching,
Yes.
sidewalk, and then
Yes.
however we think about our allocation and stuff.
There was one item, I listened in on the meeting, but since the meeting when we were brainstorming things to possibly fund, one of the thoughts that I had was, we've been doing a lot with the dark sky lighting. I used the wrong term.
No, it's
But
fine.
I wondered if there could be a small amount of money to just do a little bit of a pilot to put one or two of those lights in so we can all see what they look like. Just a thought.
I think,
I don't think that's allowable under ARPA. But Khalil, when you go forward with a proposal in February or March to our delegation for the earmark effort, the night-friendly sky or dark sky lighting might be a really good example of that, because that's something that Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey is very onto because of not just migratory birds, but the health issues. So that might be a better place to take that as a funding project, and then you could get a full pilot funded for that. So possible.
The other one, I know that we were advertising for higher pay, but whether there've been salary adjustments, whether that could be something that we use this for.
We did get grant money
Okay.
when we paid the premium for police during that
Right.
period.
right. I didn't,
Go ahead, Tim, I'm sorry.
back when the ARPA dollars first came to us, under the original ARPA program, I know there was an accommodation there for salaries, for people to make sure that their income level, was sustained during the impact of COVID. I don't believe that, where I'm struggling right now in my memory is, did the city make any adjustment at that time for our salaried employees? Anything that you
I
can
don't
recall?
believe
I mean, we met
so.
our obligations to keep people employed and.
Yeah, they all
full-
maintained hours, there was no
Exactly.
reduction in hours.
So there was no loss, income loss by any of our employees at that time, correct?
Correct.
Right.
Going back to Dutchman Harvest, if they can only deliver one unit, what was that amount? That was 135 of the 200,000 we've allocated?
He said something like he'd give us 75K back. And so that,
I
I
didn't
understand
get
that. That delta, and I'm at the follow with him, is to go from 28 units for 20-year runway to one unit and have 125K be allocated. That part, I was lost on that math.
You know, the other
I think
part,
he's assuming that
The other
the
one
other,
comes to-
the other million, the 500,000 from the state and 500,000 from the county, isn't going to happen.
right. You know, the other thing that I think would be important, based upon what Amy described earlier when she turned to Lorraine and asked for additional information, would also be helpful for us, I believe, is to fully understand the cash value of the concessions that the city council made at the time that Dutchman's Harvest was proposed. And there's value to those concessions, and I think it'd be very helpful if we actually had a handle on that. I will express my concern about what we heard today from Mr. Schell, and that is that the number of units that are, well, first of all, it was my understanding that 100% of all the units were going to be a form of equity. And in other words, it would be homeowner occupied, and it would be an opportunity for people who might not be able to own property to actually get into that game. What's been described today is different. And the concessions that the city made back in the day, and this is before any of us were serving on council, was predicated on that notion that there were going to be an opportunity for those purchasers to have an equity position. And as a result, the city made concessions, and the BPW did as well. And we need to have a good a refresher on what the value of those concessions.
I'll be honest, and agreed, but we also did make this additional, so we gave those concessions, and then we also did make this allocation.
Right, and that
as a means of subsidizing the
And that
project.
$200,000, if I again, I'm
Was for
going on.
down payment.
It was I think the 200K was to be used to offset closing costs.
You're right, and I agree
And that was not, I don't think that was applicable to all 100 and.
No, it was a 42.
No,
It
it
was
was
for the
only to the
42
No, no,
42.
agreed. That
Right.
dynamic has changed, and I agree, it concerned me somewhat. But the fact that he did say that this would provide a 20-year runway to get someone from basically a one-third off subsidy on rent to get from $1,800 to $1,200, that's helpful.
It's super helpful. I think the thing
I think
that's,
we would, that's what our, this gets to
Yeah.
what Amy's point is, like, what's our job as, in this case, it gives us an opportunity to be helpful, and to your point, Tim, to use a poker term, we're pot committed. We've already given those concessions. We, so in this case, if we fold our cards now, what have we done? We've really not, we might end up with no affordable housing of it.
Well, the developer has committed to affordable housing for the project. He stated that again today. So.
No, I think he was talking about the additional, he thinks he can get to the 35.
He can
I think
get
what
to the
he's committing to
35.
is digging deep to find the additional 7 to get to the 42. I
Correct.
think that's what he represented.
Yeah.
right.
Right, and the Delaware State Housing Authority has, their initial backing is for 24 units, correct?
I
Yes.
think he-
And then
Then he got it up to
And then
28.
28.
Up to 28.
Right.
Correct. I'm just saying that it's an
The
opportunity for
dynamic
us.
has changed. I mean, that's.
I
agree.
It has.
I
There's
just want
something
us
that
to,
bothers me also, though, with Councilman Rissert, and that is that when we take property that's now going into rent instead of giving the equity to the homeowners, and I understand why that's problematic, but what's happening is, in 20 years, the entity is going to basically own all of those properties, and it's being subsidized. So they're actually, I'd love to be in a deal where I would end up owning 28 apartment buildings that I could continue to rent after 20 years and raise the amount of money if they don't go subsidized again. I mean, it's a great business deal.
Well,
There's risk.
you're waiting there's risk, and you're waiting 20 years
Yeah.
for your, I mean, but in
Long-
serving,
it's a very long-
it's serving a community purpose.
Yeah.
And that is providing housing to people otherwise who can't secure it.
But that's interesting, but what's interesting there, so Tim, on yours, I think we should monetize, and BPW should monetize, and let's call it in kind. In other words, we're
Yeah.
not pulling it back, but just recognize what the value was for the concessions that both organizations gave. That's just good to know.
Right.
That's good to know for lots of reasons.
And may I interrupt you
sure.
right there? And I'll remind everyone that those I'm calling them concessions, those are, that was pre-ARPA. Those are real dollars, those are real things that the city and the BPW made without
As a
any kind of
commitment,
benefit.
as a
Yes.
commitment to this.
Excuse me.
Right. The part that's, and I don't think that the developer is at fault here just because of everything that's happened at all, and he's trying to solve the problem. But it is hard to look at that, whether it's 135,000, that's only helping one unit.
Yes.
That's the part that's like, well, wait a minute, that 135,000 could go to other places that helps more of the community.
Right.
So if he can, I just don't see it as we've given 135,000, so one rental unit works, unless it's a family of funding sources. So in other words, it's the relationship to the number one that is just, it just seems off. But if it's a pot of funds, which I think is what it is.
It's 1.2 million right now.
Exactly. And so
Yeah.
everybody's playing in, and I think what he has to be able to articulate it clearly on the 9th is, that means 28 units or something.
Right.
And so
And
we'll
my-
just have our share, which I think is where he's headed.
And I mean, I think my guess is he's taking what he learned today and going to the county and state and saying, hey, look, Lewis is inclined to continue to support with their 200,000, but they may not be if you guys don't follow
Correct.
through on your commitment.
Yeah.
So I think he's looking for leverage with them.
Sure.
Right.
today.
Well,
And it
I
is
think we
concerning
need
to
to
hear
know
that the talk on the street is that those
Yeah,
500,000 from the county have already been, it's suggested that they might be going towards another.
Habitat for
organization.
Humanity.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we in essence have done the same thing to BPW, which is show up in case
case
those
there's
funds
more.
aren't available.
Right.
Oh, yeah,
What can we
exactly.
use them for? So it's also somewhat responsible to say, okay, if that falls through, what's it? To that end, one of the things that we've heard is, if a project can't perform, you can then reallocate those through June, was I think something we
Yes.
heard last. So I guess a question maybe for you and Alex would be, assuming we want to stick with this Dutchman's Harvest project, could we make that conditional to say, if by June you don't have the full million or whatever raised, we're going to go somewhere
And
else
that's
with our.
similar to what the county was doing through Milford Housing, is
Okay.
they were going to extend them
Right.
till June, and if they didn't, they would recall the money and reallocate.
But they haven't yet, they're not,
So
they don't
with-
need to say what the allocation is yet, or have they, do you know if they've already said, if you guys can't use it, we're going to give it to
No.
you guys?
So because of this change with Dutchman's Harvest, county council will have to vote on whether they want to give the funding to Delaware State Housing, because it was obligated to
To
Milford Housing.
To Milford Housing.
Yeah.
So their obligation
Same
was
for
to
us.
Milford Housing, not
Correct.
to Diamond State? Because
Correct.
our obligation, initial obligation was to Diamond State. They rolled it, they assigned it to Milford Housing, and
So
as I
we would still need a resolution for ours to be Delaware Housing Authority.
Yes.
Okay,
So
no
they-
matter what.
They did it through Milford Housing.
can you,
So I guess that's my question, is if on Monday we decide, yeah, we still want to stick with that, whether there's an option for us to conditionally, if they can't perform, then give it to X.
Yeah, I mean, that 6-month grace period was for situations just like this. You've made your obligation, but something happened that was out of your control. Now, I think it would be wise if we already know what we would do, so that we're not back into people coming requesting funds.
Right.
Okay, so we would say, if that does not work, that money, whether it's 135 or whatever the number is, it's already going to be allocated to X. Then we've finished our ARPA
Agreed.
conversations.
So I think that's a challenge we should put to ourselves for Monday too, which is if we decide to go for keeping the money with Dutchman's Harvest, come up with that in mind, which
Yep.
is an alternative. Yeah.
May I ask a clarifying question? Lorraine, did I understand you to say that allocations could be made until June?
No.
No, you
No.
didn't say that, did you?
No, I did not.
Reallocations.
Okay.
Reallocations. The ARPA extension, Tim, says your allocations are due by December 31st.
Correct.
However, the government understands some things aren't working right, so there's this grace period if you had to reallocate. You have to allocate all your money by December 31st.
Correct.
Okay. Then if something happens, okay, to money that you have allocated
Right.
outside of your control, you can reallocate to an appropriate ARPA recipient. Okay, so we have a grace period. Now, if we did it everywhere, that's like an audit issue that the IG would have, but this is a perfect example of why they had the grace period put in.
Okay, I did not have an appreciation of that grace period because
It's new, it's fairly new
It
that
must
they
be
did it.
very new because I spent a good deal of time reading the code, the federal register and so forth a week ago, and it made it very clear about the allocation had to be made by the end of this month, and it did not describe.
And that's gonna be a tough
Is that what you're saying?
But the
That's
others,
what I would
it's
call out.
pure money that's been already,
Correct.
Like for
and
this
that
one,
money's
workforce
out, right?
housing,
It's
for
already been
example,
given.
I'd say.
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
good with the keep.
Yes.
So Tim's, just for clarification, so if you're thinking about workforce housing as a category, there I would expect you to say, yeah, I'm supportive of leaving the 200,000 with this plus X. With public safety, again, I would want 15K to be allocated to the ATV, with public.
So then you go more granular. It's
Exactly.
just not
That's-
categories.
Absolutely.
Correct.
Till you've expunged your 150 or your 350K.
You get $150,000 to play with.
Think about
Yeah, more
Amy's.
of that money.
It's like the Monopoly money, it's the Monopoly money, it's your turn
Yeah,
now.
allocate your 150K and your
Yeah.
350K
Yeah.
and
So two
provide
scenarios.
that with.
Two scenarios.
So
Right.
we can see if there's already some existing synergies, so that way
Right.
we can knock those off and say, look, boom, now we're only debating over 50K or
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Exactly. So it's two scenarios of money.
Yep,
Okay,
Right.
okay.
okay.
Is there any interest to schedule future meetings to discuss this?
We have a Friday meeting, or Thursday, don't we?
We do a
Public-
public workshop.
Workshop, but we don't have this on there, so.
I mean, the thought was after maybe county councils made their decision.
And when are they scheduled?
This hasn't been put on an agenda yet, but their next two meetings are the 10th and 17th.
We don't have a scheduled meeting before the end of the year, do we?
No,
No.
the 9th is the last one.
Do we have any intel to suggest that this is going to be on the county agenda for one of those two meetings?
Well, they're going to have to do their resolution change.
Yes.
At a
Yeah.
minimum.
They
They're gonna
will have
do
to
I understand that
revote.
part.
Right.
But I
But
don't
we
know,
don't know which one.
which one.
Maybe we need,
What do you think, Friday, like make a earmark that,
maybe we should put it on just in case.
so what?
After the
Okay.
17th.
Put it on what, please, Joe?
It'd probably be the 20th. Of
Just schedule
December.
a meeting.
Oh, I see.
You're saying the other one's at 19th, Lorraine?
Their county council will meet the 10th and 17th. We could do Friday the 13th, and if they don't have it on their 10th agenda, we can do the 20th.
So the 13th might be, it could be canceled.
Or we could
if
just
they
call it
can't-
the 20th.
Just call it the 20th and we'll know the answer.
Why don't
Or
we just put it on as a placeholder for the 20th at, if 9 o'clock work for everyone today?
Sure.
Okay, let's just put that on as a placeholder. We'll ask our duly
That's
sworn
a do or die.
secretary to create another
A special meeting. 9 AM on the 20th, correct?
9 a.m. Okay.
Tom, come on up. Yeah, I was about to ask for a public comment now anyway, so you're a member of the public.
The one thing from a timing perspective is, so I understand money has to be allocated but not contractually obligated by the end of the year. We are going to wind up signing contract before the end of the year, though.
Yep.
So for us, and that's going to create some potential issues if you guys decide to give us any additional money, because we were planning on amending before we signed the contract.
Got it.
So
Is the 20th work, like, would that give you enough time to, when's your last day? 20th, yeah?
well, and the 20th in the afternoon, we're in Rehoboth Beach for the wastewater treatment. So I wouldn't want to put too much fun in one day.
We could make a 13th. I mean, we could put on there the 13th in the event that we get clarity from the county this week, this following week.
Right.
Want to do that? And then we can always pull that meeting.
Okay, so
Won't be
now
published
we're
till
going to
Friday.
December 13th?
And the 20th.
And not at 9 o'clock, still good?
I'm with Joe. Let's just leave both on.
Yeah, we'll just cancel
13th and the
the one we
20th.
don't need.
And then, we'll bag the other one if we don't.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry for,
No worries, and I think by the 9th, we should have some awareness from the council whether there's appetite to give any further allocations anyway, and there might be, some that you could allocate that's known.
And does that- If we're, excuse me,
Yeah.
Andrew, if we are able to make that decision on or around the 13th, as early as the 13th, does that give you enough time to do your paperwork?
Austin, because we would just have to do an amendment.
Yeah, all you would do is amend the letter that showed the allocation. The only thing is you would probably have to schedule.
Could you guys put something on for like the 16th, just as a special?
It's a question for Mike on whether or not, can you put something on the agenda that says to the tune of, if any additional ARPA funds are received from the city of Lewis, we're allocating all of them to the water tower, so that if any monies are received, then that is the commitment that the board would make. It's almost like an overarching. Because we could still put it on our agenda for the 12th, and then just do it that way.
And these contracts that you're working with are fixed costs, correct? There's no opportunity for cost overruns?
Unless there's a change order for whatever
Correct.
reason.
But otherwise, you're satisfied that you've done your due diligence and what you're contracting really does represent, in fact, what your costs will be.
It's for one water tower erected in
And they
place.
right. And that includes the connectivity of that water tower to your existing distribution
Yep.
system, is that correct?
And altitude valves at both locations.
Right. Thank you.
Now, if we change the color to pink, that's a different story.
Yeah, that took several meetings, as I recall, about what decals are
So
going to be put on.
before we go to Bill, is there anyone online that's waving their hand? Is Haley Burns?
That's Alex.
That's Alex.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I was wondering about that.
Alex,
Hey, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, fantastic. So just a couple things to add there. If there is a potential award to the BPW, water and sewer fits squarely within the allowable uses under ARPA. I would just be careful not to frame it as money to satisfy debt, which is not an allowable use of ARPA funds, but water and sewer is. For the Barrows project, for housing insecure folks, I spoke with Mike Agnew this past week, and just to get some more information about the LLC he's trying to set up, because we'll need an entity to provide the funds to, and they don't have an LLC at this point. They're working under St. Jude Catholic Church right now. I think that's all I have right now. And El Noreen was correct in stating that with Dutchman's Harvest, there will be a need for a new resolution. Whether or not the city wants to go forward with that project, either a resolution pulling back the funds or a resolution naming a new sub-recipient.
But Alex, with respect to if we wanted to make an allocation to Theros, what would your, like, could we purchase the fence on their behalf and donate? Like, what would be a workaround if we wanted to do that for their organization?
You could, one workaround would be to name St. Jude's as the subrecipient. It's an interesting topic, maybe for a different day, but the Supreme Court has been changing its view of governments providing funds to religious organizations.
Right.
For a long time, under the Establishment Clause, it was permissible for local governments to not give funds to religious organizations. That's sort of changing in the last couple of years. Now there's an emphasis on not discriminating against religious organizations. So long as those funds were provided to St. Jude for the purpose of Theros and not for religious purposes, it would be permissible.
And similar to the community fund, I think she represented, they encompass many denominations and church groups, so that, again, we're in a good place there if we wanted to give them an allocation?
Yep.
Okay.
It would just be that the funds would not be used for religious purposes.
Okay.
So can we get some written, Alex, from you or Ellen Lorraine from you, clarification on that 6-month? I mean, my understanding is just what you've said, but Tim is right. When you research ARPA Flex even, it doesn't lay this out. But so I think Tim's point is valid. We need to see some legal documentation that we can do this.
So I would ask Alex to prepare that
Yeah.
for us, please.
Yeah, just as a backup, because, yes, it's kind of like urban lore, and everyone's doing it,
Yeah.
but
You
I
might
don't
end
want
up losing your money.
to lose your, yeah, exactly.
Right.
Okay. All right, I don't see anyone else online. Bill, do you want to ask us some questions?
Just one
Yeah,
quick
sure.
thing about Dutchman's Harvest, because again, this all was played out before my time. So just generally, is the concept of affordable housing in the city still on track? Is it still, or does this set it back?
I mean, I wouldn't say it sets it back. What our comp plan, it's been referenced before, says is that we should make efforts to address it. And we've done that in several ways. And so I don't see this any different. I think there's this, look, I think everyone's disappointed that the equity piece, it can't be realized here, but we do what we can as government,
ADUs, Donovan Smith being the other things that you've done to. Okay, and you might not be the ones to answer this, but does this cause a delay in anybody moving into Dutchman's Harvest? Because I think the first people are supposed to move in the spring. Yeah.
I don't know about the 42 units. I think what Preston's represented is the 80% to 100% of value, AMI. Those are selling well, so we see them going
So those
up.
people would
I
move
would
in, but
expect them to see,
Yeah.
I'm not sure, Janelle, I'm not here to talk about how a CO works, but
Okay.
yeah, I don't think, they seem to be building. you
Yeah.
know.
So, okay. Very good, thank you.
Thank you, Bill. You got any comment about Penn State's touchdown late in the game, when there was already, the game was in hand?
If I recall, the 3s and 4s need to play too.
Yeah,
that's right.
exactly.
We're all there to play
true,
football.
all true. And we're going to Indianapolis, so.
Right?
There you go.
Yeah,
There we go.
it's a good.
All right. So with that, I don't think there's anyone
Enjoy
else.
Indianapolis.
We'll give Richard the final dagger there. And with that, I'll call for
I move.
motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
And I second.
A second. All in favor? Aye. Okay.